Hello, I'm Robert King. This video is in response to a video that asks of Jehovah's Witnesses to answer for the way the Watchtower has translated a couple of verses in the New World Translation. I'm not going to go into John 1:1 on this video. I'll save that for another occasion. But I would like to make a comment on the way the Watchtower has translated John 8:58. Of course, most modern English translations have rendered John 8:58 as Jesus saying, "Before Abraham was, I am." And somewhere along the line that people have got it into their heads that I am is a title, that Jesus was saying that he was Jehovah. In fact, when I was doing a little research on this, one translation, I forget what it was, but it had a footnote that said that Jesus was saying that he was Jehovah. And the reasoning behind that is that what Jehovah told Moses at Exodus 3:14. But anyway, before I get into that, in demanding that Jehovah's Witnesses answer for this, the fact of the matter is the Watchtower has already done that. They've written a number of Watchtower articles explaining their reasons for translating this verse the way they have. And anyone who has access to the Watchtower CD-ROM, all you have to do is enter the phrase ego ami, which is basically translated I am from Greek into English, and you get a lot of information on that. Also in the large print reference Bible that the Watchtower has produced, there's an appendix in the back, and appendix number 6F has some information on this. First off, I'd like to address the point that I alluded to about I am going back to Genesis 3:14. Of course, Exodus 3:14. Of course, Exodus was originally written in Hebrew, but one of the first translations was into Greek, and that's called the Septuagint. So in the Septuagint, we find that phrase ego ami. But that is not all the scripture says there. In fact, let me read to you the last part of what the Watchtower comment is here. It says, further, attempting to identify Jesus with Jehovah, some try to use Exodus 3:14 out of the Septuagint, which reads in Greek, ego ami hoon, which means I am the being, or I am the existing one. Now, when Jesus was speaking to the Jews in the 8th chapter of John, he did not say ego ami hoon. He simply said ego ami, and he used that expression many times. For example, when he said, I am the Christ, ego ami Christ. So that argument that I am was taken from Exodus 3:14 doesn't hold water at all. But the Watchtower comments here that this expression, ego ami, usually it is transliterated basically from the Greek. It's used as I am. But there are exceptions to every rule. And the Watchtower quotes some Greek scholars, some of them, 100 years ago, and they state that when the present also includes a past tense, when the verb expresses a state which commenced at an earlier period, but still continues, a state in its duration, then a different verb can be used a different verb tense can be used. So Jesus was not talking about his existence then. He was standing before the Jews saying, I am, but the question had to do with his relationship to Abraham. Think about this. Let's say that somebody is reading the Bible for the very first time, and they have no preconceived notions and no prejudices whatsoever, and they're just reading the story here. And they get to the phrase there, the Jews are, who are you? You're not even 50 years old, and you've seen Abraham? And then Jesus replies, truly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Now the unbiased reader will likely scratch their head in bewilderment, because the sentence, the way it's constructed, does not make any sense. And you don't have to be a Greek scholar to appreciate that, but you do have to appreciate that the English I mean, back in grammar school, we went to grammar school, right? And we learned basic rules of grammar. And one of those basic rules is that in order to have a complete sentence, you have to have two elements. You have to have a subject, and you have to have a predicate. And the predicate modifies the subject. And there's one cardinal rule that every predicate must have a verb. Okay? So in that sentence, before Abraham was, that's the subject. The predicate is I am. But when the Trinitarians take that phrase I am, they're not using it as a verb. They're using it as a proper noun. Supposedly, you could be able to substitute I am for the name of Jehovah, right? So if we did that, let's take out I am and plug in the name of Jehovah and read that sentence. Before Abraham was Jehovah. Doesn't make sense, does it? It's not a complete sentence. It's grammatically incorrect. Jesus spoke correct Aramaic or Greek or whatever he was speaking at the time, right? The problem is in the translation. By turning I am into a proper noun, that predicate phrase does not have a verb. And so it's an ingrammatically incorrect sentence, I should say. I've got to learn to talk myself. But that's the problem. So the Watchtower has explained here that they're perfectly justified in modifying the tense of ego eimi to show that Jesus was expressing an ongoing thing that happened before Abraham was. The Watchtower Society is not the only Bible translators to recognize that ego eimi can be expressed in a different sense. And this New World Translation shows that back in the 4th century, there was a Syriac edition translation. They rendered it, before Abraham was, I have been. Another Syrian edition, before Abraham came to be, I was. In the 5th century, the Syriac Peshitta, before Abraham existed, I was. And then a Georgian translation from the 5th century, before Abraham came to be, I was. In the 6th century, the Ethiopic translation, before Abraham was born, I was. So, and there's modern translations as well. I think the Moffat translation, published about 100 years ago, it said before Abraham was, I existed, or something like that. Those translators were aware of the ego eimi, but obviously recognized that it didn't make sense, that Jesus was talking about his existence in the past, wasn't taking a title to himself. And so that's simply nonsensical. There is an ego eimi that I think has more relevance. And if we read the Hebrew scriptures, for example, Isaiah 42:8, I'm sure in the Septuagint, the Greek translation, it says, I am Jehovah. Ego eimi, Yehovah. In the book of Ezekiel, Jehovah says over 60 times, the nations and you people will have to know that I am Jehovah. Ego eimi, Jehovah. You can take the name of Jehovah out of the Bible, like I say. You can turn Jehovah into Jesus. It's not going to work. In the end, the irony is that Jesus himself will make sure that his Father is brought back into a prominent position. He will force the nations to know that his Father is Jehovah. And Jehovah's Witnesses will be vindicated in the end. Our God will vindicate himself and Jehovah's Witnesses in connection with him. So